Before Laverne and Shirley, before the Jeffersons, there was the most hyped flop in TV history, a show that 5 experts unanimously predicted would be the season's biggest hit. Featured a mime-trained Tony winner, aired between TV's 2 #1 shows, and was dead in 15 weeks flat. Fact 1. 5 TV experts unanimously predicted failure. In the fall of 1974, TV Guide magazine decided to poll 5 of the television industry's top programming professionals with a single question: which new show premiering that season would become the year's biggest hit? These weren't casual viewers or amateur critics. These were seasoned executives and experts who made their living predicting what audiences would watch. Every single one of them, all 5 experts, picked the same show: Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers. It was a unanimous decision, which almost never happens in the unpredictable world of television. The show had everything going for it: a Tony Award-winning star, legendary producers James L. Brooks and Alan Burns, fresh off their success with The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and what many considered the best time slot in television history, sandwiched between All in the Family and The Mary Tyler Moore Show on Saturday nights. The experts were so confident that this combination of talent and placement guaranteed success. But in one of the most spectacular prediction disasters in television history, Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers lasted just 15 weeks before being canceled in January of 1975. The show that everyone said couldn't fail became one of the most embarrassing flops of the decade, proving that even the smartest minds in television can get it completely wrong when 5 separate experts all make the exact same confident prediction. Fact 2. The star was Marcel Marceau's protege. Before Paul Sand became a television star, he had one of the most unusual training backgrounds of any sitcom lead in history. At just 18 years old, Sand traveled to Paris, France, where he hoped to study the art of mime from the masters. While there, he had the opportunity to perform for Marcel Marceau, who was already recognized as the greatest mime artist in the world. Marceau was so genuinely impressed by the young American's talent and understanding of the craft that he did something he rarely did. He invited Sand to join his professional touring mime troupe. This wasn't just a brief apprenticeship or a few lessons. Sand became one of Marceau's actual performers, traveling and performing with the legendary artist. This made Sand one of only a handful of American actors who could claim they were personally trained by Marcel Marceau himself. The skills Sand learned in Paris, the precise physical control, the ability to convey emotion without words, the understanding of timing and gesture, would influence his entire acting career. Years later, when Sand landed his own sitcom, he brought that unique physical comedy training to the role, giving his character, Robert Dreyfuss, a gentle, expressive quality that set him apart from typical sitcom leads of the era. It's rare enough for a television star to have serious theatrical training, but having studied under the most famous mime in history made Paul Sand's background truly one of a kind. Fact 3. Created during a beach conversation. The entire genesis of Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers came down to a single casual conversation on a beach. Producer James L. Brooks, who had already achieved massive success with The Mary Tyler Moore Show, approached Paul Sand about creating a series specifically for him. Brooks had been impressed by Sand's guest appearance on The Mary Tyler Moore Show and saw potential for a starring vehicle. But Sand was hesitant about committing to a television series, having seen too many sitcoms follow tired, predictable formulas. During their conversation on the beach, Sand laid down what seemed like an unusual condition: as long as I'm not married or a lawyer in it. He was tired of sitcoms where the main character's identity was defined entirely by their profession or their family situation. He wanted to play someone who felt like a real, complicated person navigating life and relationships without those standard sitcom crutches. Brooks's response was remarkably simple. He just said, "Okay," and agreed to Sand's terms on the spot. That single word essentially greenlit the entire series. True to his promise, Brooks created a show about Robert Dreyfuss, an unmarried bass player for the Boston Symphony Orchestra who was just trying to figure out life, love, and friendship. The character wasn't a lawyer, wasn't married, and existed outside the typical sitcom frameworks. It was an informal agreement made on a beach that shaped the entire direction of the series. Fact 4. It had TV's best time slot ever. When CBS scheduled Paul Sand and Friends and Lovers for Saturday nights at 8:30 p.m., they handed the show what many television historians consider the most advantageous time slot any new series has ever received in the entire history of American television. The show aired directly between two of the most dominant programs of the era, All in the Family, which was the #1 rated show in all of television, and The Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was also a top-rated critical and commercial success. This meant that Friends and Lovers had a built-in audience of millions of viewers who were already settled in front of their television sets and had no reason to change the channel. The strategy was simple. Viewers who tuned in for Archie Bunker at 8 p.m. would stay for Paul Sand at 8:30 and then continue watching for Mary Richards at 9. The network was essentially handing Sand's show a guaranteed audience of loyal CBS viewers who were already committed to spending their entire Saturday evening with the network. For a new show, this kind of placement was unprecedented. Most new series had to fight for viewers, competing against established hits on other networks, but Friends and Lovers had no real competition. It should have been impossible to fail with this kind of scheduling advantage. The fact that the show still managed to get canceled despite this perfect time slot made its failure even more shocking and remains one of the great mysteries of 70s television programming. Fact 5. Penny Marshall's first starring role. Before Penny Marshall became one of the most recognizable faces on television as Laverne DeFazio, and long before she became a successful film director, she had her first major starring role on Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers. Marshall played Janice Dreyfus, the sister of Paul Sand's character Robert, and it marked the first time she had been cast as a series regular rather than in small guest spots. This wasn't just another minor role in her early career, it was her big break, the role that would prove she could carry a character across multiple episodes and hold her own alongside experienced actors. The show may have only lasted 15 weeks, but Marshall's performance caught the attention of the right people. When Friends and Lovers was canceled, Marshall's agent and industry connections helped her land a guest spot on Happy Days, where she played a character named Laverne in a single episode. That one appearance was so well received by audiences that the producers brought her back, eventually spinning her character off into Laverne and Shirley, which became one of the most successful sitcoms of the late 70s and early 80s. Without her time on Friends and Lovers, Marshall might never have had the visibility and experience necessary to land the Laverne role. The failed sitcom became the unexpected launching pad for her entire career, proving that even canceled shows can lead to superstardom if the right person notices your talent. Fact 6. Henry Winkler appeared in the pilot. In the very first episode of Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers, titled Getting to First Base, a young actor named Henry Winkler made a guest appearance in a small supporting role. At the time of filming in 1974, Winkler was still a relatively unknown actor, trying to build his career with whatever television work he could find. He had recently been cast in a new show called Happy Days as a minor character named Arthur Fonzarelli, a motorcycle-riding greaser who was only supposed to appear occasionally. No one, including Winkler himself, had any idea that the Fonz would become one of the most iconic characters in television history. When Friends and Lovers premiered in September of 1974, Happy Days had only been on the air for a few months, and Winkler wasn't yet a household name. But by the time Friends and Lovers was canceled just 15 weeks later, the Fonz had already started to take over Happy Days, and Winkler's star was rapidly rising. Looking back at that pilot episode now, it's strange to see Winkler in such a minor role on a show that would be forgotten while he was simultaneously becoming one of the biggest stars on television. It's one of those odd moments in TV history where you can see two shows heading in completely opposite directions, one canceled almost immediately, the other becoming a cultural phenomenon, with the same actor appearing on both during the exact same season. Fact 7. Valerie Harper recommended the star Paul Sand's entire path to getting his own sitcom started with a backstage emergency on The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Bob Newhart had been scheduled to guest star in an episode, but at the last minute he had to drop out, leaving the producers scrambling to find a replacement actor who could step in quickly. Valerie Harper, who played Rhoda Morgenstern on the show, happened to know Paul Sand from their days together at Second City, the legendary improvisational comedy theater in Chicago. She suggested Sand to the producers, telling them he was talented, reliable, and could handle the role on short notice. The producers trusted Harper's recommendation and brought Sand in. His guest appearance was so well received by both the cast and the audience that it caught the attention of James L. Brooks and Alan Burns, the creators of The Mary Tyler Moore Show. They were impressed enough by Sand's natural comedic timing and genuine likability that they began discussing the possibility of creating an entire series built around him. Without Valerie Harper's recommendation at that crucial moment when the show needed someone fast, Paul Sand might never have gotten the exposure that led to Friends and Lovers. It's a reminder of how much success in Hollywood can depend on being in the right place at the right time and having friends who believe in your talent enough to put your name forward when opportunities arise. Fact 8. MTM was spread too thin. In 1974, MTM Enterprises, the production company behind The Mary Tyler Moore Show, was attempting something that no television production company had successfully managed before, running 5 separate sitcoms simultaneously. They had The Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was still at the peak of its success; The Bob Newhart Show, another solid hit; Rhoda, a spin-off that was performing extremely well; The Texas Wheelers, a new show starring Jack Elam; and Paul Sand and Friends and Lovers. Years later, co-creator Alan Burns openly admitted that the company had overextended itself and that Friends and Lovers suffered because of it. Burns explained that the creative team that had made MTM's earlier shows so successful was now divided among too many projects. The writers, producers, and executives who had once been able to focus all their attention on making The Mary Tyler Moore Show great were now being pulled in 5 different directions, trying to maintain quality across multiple productions. Burns acknowledged that Friends and Lovers ended up being mediocre, not because Paul Sand wasn't talented or because the premise was bad, but simply because the creative resources and attention the show needed were exhausted. The company was trying to do too much at once, and something had to give. Unfortunately for Paul Sand, his show was the one that paid the price for MTM's ambition, becoming a cautionary tale about the dangers of spreading yourself too thin in the television industry. Fact 9. One of MTM's first 2 flops before 1974, MTM Enterprises had maintained an almost perfect track record, with every show they produced becoming at least a moderate success and most becoming genuine hits. The Mary Tyler Moore Show was a cultural phenomenon. The Bob Newhart Show was beloved by critics and audiences, and even their first spin-off, Rhoda, became an immediate ratings winner. The company had built a reputation for quality and success that seemed unshakable. But in the 1974-75 season, that perfect record came crashing down with 2 spectacular failures. The Texas Wheelers, starring Jack Elam as a rough-around-the-edges father raising his children, was canceled after just 4 episodes, making it one of the quickest cancellations in the company's history. Paul Sand and Friends and Lovers lasted longer, but was still canceled after just 15 weeks in January of 1975. These 2 failures happening in the same season marked the first time MTM had to confront the reality that their name alone couldn't guarantee success. The company that had seemed incapable of making a bad show suddenly had 2 canceled series on their hands, shattering their reputation for infallibility. It was a humbling moment for a production company that had been riding high on years of critical acclaim and commercial success, proving that even the most successful production companies can't win every time. Fact 10. It actually had decent ratings. Despite being labeled a failure and getting canceled after just 15 weeks, Paul Sand and Friends and Lovers actually finished the 1974-75 season ranked 25th in the overall ratings, which by any normal standard would be considered a respectable performance for a new show. Many series that ranked lower than 25th place were renewed for additional seasons, so the raw numbers alone shouldn't have spelled doom for the show. The problem wasn't that people weren't watching, the problem was what those numbers represented in context. The show aired directly after All in the Family, which was pulling in absolutely massive audiences as the #1 show on television. When Friends and Lovers came on at 8:30, the show was losing approximately 1/3 of that enormous lead-in audience. From the network's perspective, this was unacceptable. They had given Paul Sand the best possible time slot, sandwiched between two of their biggest hits, and the show was still hemorrhaging viewers instead of holding on to them. CBS executives weren't looking at the show as a 25th place finisher. They were looking at it as a failure to capitalize on the greatest scheduling advantage any news show had ever received. By that measure, even decent ratings looked like a disaster. The network reasoned that any show, even a mediocre one, should have performed better in that time slot, and if Friends and Lovers couldn't succeed there, it wouldn't succeed anywhere. It's a harsh lesson in how television success isn't just about raw numbers, but about meeting the specific expectations created by your time slot. Fact 11. Replaced by a sitcom legend. By late October of 1974, CBS executives had already lost confidence in Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers and began making plans for its replacement. They rushed a pilot into production for a new show called The Jeffersons, a spin-off of All in the Family, focusing on George and Louise Jefferson, the upwardly mobile black couple who had been popular supporting characters on the parent show. The pilot was fast-tracked through production with the specific intention of taking over the Saturday night 8:30 time slot if Friends and Lovers continued to underperform. In January of 1975, CBS pulled the plug on Friends and Lovers, and on January 18th, The Jeffersons premiered in its exact time slot, right between All in the Family and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. The gamble paid off immediately. The Jeffersons was a hit from the start, capitalizing on the established audience for the Bunker family while telling its own distinct stories about class, race, and social mobility in America. The show would go on to run for 11 seasons, becoming one of the longest-running sitcoms in television history and one of the most successful spin-offs ever created. It's one of television's starkest contrasts. One show barely lasted 3 months in a time slot, while its replacement ran for more than a decade in the exact same spot. The Jeffersons proved that the time slot wasn't cursed. It just needed the right show to take advantage of it. Fact 12. The title confused everyone. One of the many problems plaguing Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers was that nobody seemed to know what the show was actually called. The official title was Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers, a wordy and awkward name that clearly existed because the network and producers knew that most viewers had no idea who Paul Sand was. By putting his name right in the title, they were trying to build recognition for a star who wasn't yet famous. But this created confusion everywhere. Television listings, newspaper TV sections, and even promotional materials from CBS used different variations of the name. Some called it Friends and Lovers, dropping Paul Sand's name entirely. Others listed it as Friends and Lovers with an ampersand. Some promotional materials referred to it simply as The Paul Sand Show, treating the actor's name as the entire identity of the program. This inconsistency made it harder for viewers to find the show in their TV listings or remember what it was called when telling friends about it. The title confusion was likely a symptom of a larger problem. The network didn't know how to market the show because they didn't have confidence in either the premise or the star's name recognition. If the title had been simpler and more consistent from the start, it might have helped viewers remember and find the show more easily. Instead, the multiple names just added to the sense that nobody, not even the network, really knew what they had or how to sell it to audiences. Fact 13. Star-trained under Second City's founder's mother, Paul Sand's training in improvisational comedy came from one of the most important figures in the history of American theater, Viola Spolin. As a child and young performer, Sand studied under Spolin, who had invented what she called theater games, a revolutionary approach to teaching acting and improvisation that focused on spontaneity, truthfulness, and ensemble work. Spolin's methods became the foundation for improvisational theater in America, and her teaching spread through her books and through the actors she trained. What makes this connection even more interesting is that Viola Spolin was the mother of Paul Sills, who went on to found Second City, the legendary Chicago comedy theater that launched the careers of everyone from John Belushi to Tina Fey. This created an ongoing source of confusion because people would hear that Paul Sand was connected to Second City through Paul Sills and his mother Viola Spolin, and they would sometimes mix up the two Pauls, Paul Sand and Paul Sills. The fact that both Pauls were connected to Second City that Sand had studied under Sills's mother and that they were both influential in improvisational comedy made the confusion even easier. Sand's training under Viola Spolin gave him a foundation in improvisation that was as pure as you could get. He learned from the woman who literally wrote the book on theater games and improvisational technique, making him part of a direct lineage that shaped American comedy for generations. Fact 14. Critics called it too sophisticated. When Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers was canceled, CBS executives needed to explain why a show with such a perfect time slot and such high expectations had failed so quickly. Their explanation was that the show was too sophisticated for the average television audience. They argued that Paul Sand's gentle, understated performance and the show's focus on realistic relationships and quiet character moments were simply over the heads of viewers who wanted broader comedy and more obvious jokes. According to the executives, the show was too smart, too subtle, and too refined for what audiences actually wanted on Saturday nights. But this explanation became controversial almost immediately because just weeks later, CBS replaced Friends and Lovers with The Jeffersons, a show that dealt with complex issues of race, class, and social mobility in America. The Jeffersons was many things, but it wasn't subtle or understated. It featured broad comedy, loud arguments, and George Jefferson's aggressive personality. Network executives openly admitted that The Jeffersons wasn't particularly sophisticated, yet it became a massive hit in the exact same time slot where the supposedly too sophisticated Friends and Lovers had failed. This contradiction suggested that maybe the problem wasn't sophistication at all. Maybe Friends and Lovers simply wasn't as entertaining or engaging as the network wanted to believe, and blaming the audience for being too unsophisticated was easier than admitting they had misjudged what would work. Fact 15. Paul Sand is still working at 92. After Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers was canceled, Paul Sand didn't disappear from show business. Instead, he built a long, steady career that lasted more than 5 decades. Throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and beyond, Sand appeared in more than 100 different television shows and films, working consistently even if he never became a household name. He showed up in everything from Star Trek: The Next Generation to Seinfeld to Crossing Jordan, always bringing his unique, gentle energy and skilled comedic timing to whatever role he played. He worked in theater, did voice acting, appeared in independent films, and took guest roles on major network series. But perhaps most remarkably, Sand didn't slow down even as he entered his 90s. In 2023, at the age of 91 years old, Sand wrote and directed his own play in Hollywood titled The Pilot Who Crashed the Party, demonstrating that his creativity and drive to perform hadn't diminished at all, despite his age. As of 2026, Sand is 92 years old and still active in the entertainment industry, making him one of the longest-working performers from the generation of actors who came up through improvisational theater in the 60s. His career stands as proof that you don't need to be the star of a successful sitcom to have a meaningful, lasting career in entertainment. You just need talent, persistence, and a genuine love for the craft.